Welcome back, everyone. Here we are at another episode of Led by Life. We're your hosts. I'm Rafaela. This is Hannah. And we've made it to the 19th gene key, the 19th gate in human design. So we'll get into that energy and kind of see what comes up there. But I just wanted to say hello first and welcome. This one is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I laughed out loud again.
Did you? What part?
Yeah, because I think I referenced this last week when we were talking about the 18th, but this week there was another sentence that said that people who have like the 19th in their hologenetic profile tend to be healers or therapists. And I just laughed. I just laughed because I don't know if you feel this way, but as we like continue to go throughout this journey, I feel as if I'm like unlocking pieces of my soul, unlocking pieces of like parts of me, a different essence of who I am, and didn't really realize like, wow, how true like it is. Not to say that this is like the end all be all, it just gives you all the answers or anything, but it's like freakishly accurate.
It is, yeah. And I feel the same. And I feel like in a way I'm becoming less attached to having to know all the answers, because it's just like each time I learn a little bit more, I get like a pleasant surprise. And so it's almost like helping me with my process of detaching from being so serious about needing to know my purpose, needing to know what I came here for, because it's just being revealed to me in all of these different kinds of layers and ways. And that's a big process for me to go through, is letting go of attachment as part of the 25th gene key, and not being so serious, moving out of seriousness as the 46th being my sun gate. So it's just, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, this one, there's a lot of reference to mysticism and to magic. And that's what I sort of feel like, that's what I hear when you say like letting go of some attachment, working with detachment, is when we're moving out of feeling logical or serious about something, more so opening ourselves up to like the spontaneity of like what can be sort of shown to us when we're not kind of working in this more rigid process of trying to learn something. And I feel like that's kind of like how our flows actually ended up being. Like in the beginning, it was very much like feeling like we needed, I'll speak for myself, like it felt like I needed to know this, and not in a sense of being an expert or anything, but like when you're talking about something, you want to have an idea of what you're speaking about, right? I want to feel competent in that area. And so I can see even now, as we've like continued this process, it's sort of been a little bit more of like, well, let's just see what comes up.
Yeah. It's like some relief for our defined ajnas that just want to know all the answers. Because I remember posing this question at the beginning, early on in my journey with learning about human design, was, I'm second line. We're not supposed to do all this study and research and want to know all the answers, because things kind of come a little bit more naturally. But then at the same time, I do have this part of me that does want to know things. And I suppose it's that defined ajna. But it is like a relaxing. It's like we can still do this study and still get excited by learning and uncovering new things, but it's not in a grasping kind of like, I have to know all the answers. Like, what's the purpose of it all kind of energy? Yeah. It's a lot more relaxed and peaceful.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the way in which like Richard Rudd explains it, is more so like the art of contemplation. And I feel I feel like it's just very exciting when we read about something, particularly like with this one, I felt it where I read it and I was like, wow, like I have an idea of how that energy already relates to me, but I'm just so open to seeing how this one or any of the ones that we've gone through, or all of them as we're continuing this journey, will land and unfold in like my physical life in this present reality. And so it's like, yeah, it's almost like, wow, what possibilities can happen now, just letting the material sort of land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's almost like we each have our own interpretation of the energy, because of course we do, because we have our different energy type that flavors the gate or the gene key. We have our authority, we have our areas of openness and our areas of definition, we have our own conditioning, we have all of our perspectives, we have like all of these different things working together, which colors the experience for each and every one of us. So it's like you get this sense of the energy, but we're all interpreting it in completely different ways, which I think is so beautiful. And I have 3 human design books, or well, I have the Gene Keys and then 2 human design books, and I read all of them on the 19th energy to get a different feel of these people who are sharing their different interpretations. And yeah, it's just fascinating. And then you get to take that information and apply it to your own life through your experiment. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And you and I actually both have the 19th defined in our design. In our unconscious side is like another way they describe it, but the design side, the body side, the unconscious. I have it in the 6th line, and Hannah has it in the 1st, you said? In the 1st. So, well, first I want to go back because you've taken a couple different interpretations of like the 19th. And so I'm wondering, like, what has been your take now on them? Are there any like similarities or differences, or just, yeah, what's your take on them?
Yes. I'm trying to remember. I was saying to Rafa before we got on here, like, it's weird because I'm in Australia, we record in the morning for me, and I always read it the night before to kind of refresh my memory, even if I've read the chapter earlier in the week. And then I wake up and I feel like, what is it even about? I think it's really about sensitivity. I'm just going to pause for a moment because the cleaners making some noise out there. It's about sensitivity. It's about the material, really rooted in the material world, in to do with like resources, and to do with like needing what we need, our human needs, and then to do with like making sure that everyone's needs are taken care of. That's kind of like the general energy that I got. And this is where, when we look at the gene keys, we can see the movement or the transformation from the shadow of codependency. So like neediness, needing each other in a really codependent sort of way, to moving into the higher expression or the gift of sensitivity, being sensitive to other people's needs. It's sort of like, I think of empathetic, thinking about what other people need and not just being selfish and thinking about ourselves and our own needs. And then moving into this highest frequency of sacrifice. So that was kind of what I got. How about you? What was your feeling? or interpretation.
Yeah, you're sort of like giving me a refresher on what I had taken in from it as well. And so now I'm kind of thinking about how there is this quality of being sensitive to other people's needs. And in that, I guess for myself, I always kind of like ask myself, how does it show up in my own life, especially if it's like defined. And it's interesting because I think I probably have talked about this, like, if not on the podcast, then maybe in the circuitry course we had taken together, about how codependency comes up within my own life and taking an honest look at that. But there's this aspect of, yes, the sensitivity of like being able to recognize the needs of others with just kind of being like in that presence of that person. And then even it had mentioned picking up on the needs through the auric field of sorts. And so I think that comes into like sensitivity when you're in a room and you can notice that someone is feeling a particular experience and really picking up on it, not taking it as your own, but like just being aware of like the energy in the room. And sometimes that could almost be to like a fault. Again, when I think of like codependency, I think of also our codependency with relationships within humans. And it's interesting because I was reading like some of the qualities of the root center, because the 19th comes out of the root center, which is this other place of pressure.
Yeah.
And it's a place of pressure, but not only pressure, a pressure center, but it's also a motor center. And it's very much connected to like the adrenals and the hormone system of our bodies. And with taking all of that in, I was thinking about how it sort of relates to our neediness of, well, it can be needy, but they also say like another expression of like codependency can be like isolating. I think it comes back to this feeling, this having a feeling of need, of being of need, or not getting enough of that attention. But there was something that really that it like had brought me to, as far as the adrenal system and how it relates to, honestly, it was something and I completely forgot.
I could see it. I could see it go.
It was there and I was thinking about it and it made sense because it's something I've been thinking about recently. And then I went to go explain it and it completely left my mind. So that's what that just jumble of words was. It was when things literally leave my mind.
Well, if it comes back, it'll come back.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, what I found really interesting, like, so you mentioned it's in the root, the 19th gate is in the root center, and we both have undefined roots, but we both have quite a few gates coming out of our roots. And then it meets the 49th gate in the emotional solar plexus. And so for both of us, this is a hanging gate, right? And then the 49th, being in the emotional solar plexus, this is where we're both open, because we're not emotional manifestors, we're ego manifestors. So for both of us, this is an area of openness. So again, this is where we're like really sensitive to conditioning, sensitive to feeling things from other people, picking up energies from other people in these areas of openness. And for me personally, I have a completely open emotional solar plexus. And so I really feel this amplified. I really feel this energy amplified. And it's interesting that the sensitivity is like starts in the root, but then it moves up to this emotional solar plexus. And that example you gave earlier of feeling other people's like auras or feeling that emotional energy. I've been becoming so much more aware of this since understanding about my openness in human design, and that this sensitivity is actually a beautiful thing and it's a beautiful gift, but it's learning how to relate to the sensitivity and relate to the openness in the emotional center with so much more compassion and understanding, because in the past I used to get so taken over by the emotions that I felt, and I've always my whole life been told that I'm too sensitive and I'm too emotional. And so when I learned that I was non-emotional or open emotional in human design, I kind of was like, what? Like, I'm super emotional, but it's this openness that then picks up, is like a sponge and so receptive to all the emotions. And so, yeah, it's been a really interesting learning that I can feel other people's emotions in a really big way, but I don't have to take it on as mine and become like codependent in that way. But I can also still be really caring and supportive and compassionate towards how people are feeling. I just need to have strong boundaries and know that that's not mine to carry forever or, you know, that's not mine to continue to carry. I can feel it in the moment and process whatever's being felt, but I don't have to continue to carry that. It's not my job. It's not my responsibility. Yeah.
No, it's interesting because this is like one of the first times as I'm hearing you like even describe your way of interpreting it, and how it like shows up and how you've like made that connection as it being a hanging gate and it kind of taking that momentum towards the emotional solar plexus. Like this is the first time I feel like I really don't even know the words to describe. And maybe that's why I lost it. I feel like that's why I lost the thought that was like that I thought I wanted to express when it comes to this gate or this energy, because I wonder if it has something to do with it being in the unconscious for me. I don't know if is it in the unconscious for you as well?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. And I don't know if maybe it's also something of like where the gate, the line that it sits in. I have no idea. But as I'm sitting here, even kind of like being in this experience with you, I'm finding myself not necessarily having even language to describe how I relate to it.
Well, it's also really about feeling, isn't it? This kind of energy is all about feeling emotions, feeling what other people are feeling the needs. And it's not so much about thinking or making sense of, is it?
Well, yeah, you're right, because it also is, it's like they talk about it as being a stress center, like again, but stress in the sense that it has energy to be used, to be kind of like mobilized and pushed out into all these other centers so that then it ultimately goes to the throat center. And that's what I'm wondering is like, what if right now there isn't some sort of pressure coming from the center and talking or being with it that feels like it needs to like move somewhere. And you know, it's interesting because I remember I had told you when we were getting on that like I've been really tired this past 2 days. I haven't like felt my best, and I just wonder if that has anything to do with this being in this, because I know that this is a pressure to be sensitive to basic needs. And that was one of the things I found interesting too, that all of the different gates have a different pressure.
In the root center.
Yeah.
I didn't go into that, but that is interesting, like a different flavor of pressure.
A different flavor of pressure. Yeah. And I even went like, and I looked at all the gates that you have out of here and like
There's a
read
lot.
them. I read them all. And, surprisingly, like they'd all make sense when I think about what I know about Hannah. So yeah, it's quite fun. Do you have your chart with you?
I do, yeah. So I have, what's your curiosity around it?
Yeah. Well, because so I think you have the 58, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's this pressure to be correct or perfect or to make things better.
Yeah.
You have the 38, which is a pressure to find or struggle for purpose in life, which I have that one as well.
Say that again. It just cut out on the Zoom.
You have the 38,
The
so do I,
38.
which is this pressure to find or struggle for purpose in life.
Yeah.
You also have the 54, which is the pressure to achieve, to rise up, to transform. I believe I have that one as well.
Yeah.
And then and I read the 53 and I thought, oh, this really seems like Hannah too. The pressure to begin or to start new things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, and then the 19, the pressure to be sensitive to basic needs. And then also the 41, the pressure to feel the desire for new experiences. So it's just very interesting when I had gone through some of these different ones and even reading them for myself, of like, if looking at it as like there's this pressure, like this force that comes out for any one of these different sort of qualities of life. They also talk about having a balance to kind of be able to recognize, okay, when is it going to be appropriate, listening to your authority when undefined, to like move that pressure or to kind of like mobilize it or get it going somewhere else.
And I suppose, like, for us as manifestors, having this open but having our hearts defined, it's like checking in with the will center. Do I have the will for something? Do I have that like motivation, that energy of desire and motivation and willpower to mobilize this pressure that I'm feeling? Because I have heard that as well. I've heard one of the coaches that I worked with explain that, like, having so many gates coming out of an undefined center, I can feel a lot of other people's pressure to do things, to get things going, to start things, like that adrenaline. And I've definitely experienced that in my life. Like, stress was probably the leading energy that I felt for like a good decade of my life, maybe longer. Just feeling like stress, constantly in a state of stress. And I've been, working that back over the last 5, 6, 7 years as I've begun to slow my life down. And it's just interesting learning about human design at the time that I did, that it's even been more and more of a realization, like, you have this energy. Yes, you have these areas of definition, like that drive, like that motivation, or probably not motivation, sorry, this like fighter energy in the 38 and this drive energy in the 54th. And I can't remember what the 53 is. Is it to do with like perseverance?
Beginnings, like to start new things.
Oh, starting new things. Like, yeah, I have these energies, but they're not consistent. And so I don't need to be feeling this constant pressure to be acting on them all the time. But it just gives me this like another level of self-compassion. Like, you're not just here to be at peace and relaxing all the time. You do have these energies within you that want to be expressed, but it's just having the wisdom to know when is the right time to express them, I suppose. Yeah. How about yourself? How do you relate to?
Well, it's interesting because I feel as if this has really sort of taken on a new challenge, being back in like a work setting around a lot of people in a very acute setting. And this might have been something that I was going to speak on that lost my thought, but I didn't know exactly how to kind of bring it all together, which is, it's interesting to me that in this area, there is this whole story, whether it's within this gate or within the gate that sits in this root center, around codependency at a shadows frequency, to sensitivity and the adrenal system and this stress factor. It all kind of relates to me. Like I work in the world of addictions, in the field of addictions. And so that's one of the things that kind of, when you look at the center and then read the 19th and like how you were connecting it to that hanging gate, or to, the 42, I believe it is, or whatever it is that comes out of the emotional solar plexus that kind of brings this storyline. It's kind of, I can see how a shadow or an unbalanced or a conditioned experience of all of this is really, really experienced when people are going through addictions, or even codependent relationships, which sometimes you can find hand in hand with addictions. But that's one of the things that I've kind of like been able to sort of just recognize the story that plays out within this energy. And yeah, I just, again, it's another one of those things where I don't know how to describe it. I really only know how to work with it when I'm in the presence of it.
Yeah.
Because, like how this would relate to like me being back in a work setting is that I do feel like I have, I pick up on a lot of the urgency or the feeling of the sense of urgency around needs needing to be met or things needing to be done. And I was reading something, I was just like, I'm picturing literally how I can do all of these things, and they're not my pressures. They're not like, they're not my things that I feel like need to be met, right? They're almost everybody else's. And I think, like for the last couple of years, I've been in more so of like a very recluse, which is like the sixth line. I've been very much in like a recluse kind of place in life where I was just working for myself and I was working from home, and I'd see a few friends, but I'd see family, friends and family. But for the most time, I was spending a lot of time by myself. And so when I feel like it was clearer to me, honestly. It was clearer to me when I had the energy, when I didn't have the energy to do something, or had the pressure to do something. And I could always kind of check in with myself. And I felt like I could, most of the time, I could go off and do that thing because I have the heart center defined. So if I have like this real desire to do it, or this will or this passion to do something, I can go ahead and do it. And now I'm noticing that like being back, it's a little harder. Like I could do all of these things at any given time, but they're not coming from myself, really. They're just coming from like what's calling of me from the environment.
Yeah. And so I guess that's where it's so important to be able to check in with your authority.
Well, because it just speaks to this idea of like burnout.
Yes. I think that's what you were maybe going to get to when you were talking about the adrenals, or that's what came up for me when you were saying that, was this idea of burnout, because I've heard a lot of like adrenal fatigue being related to stress and burnout. And it makes sense, doesn't it, when we're constantly under pressure in a state of stress, that we burn out. That's completely unsustainable. Even if you have a defined root, defined sacral, like if you're doing too much or if you're not doing the things that are really, I suppose, aligned, you will burn out.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's your relationship been with burnout?
I don't know if I don't know if I've ever let myself really get burnt out. Like once I hit that edge, I usually call it quits.
Mm.
Just thinking about like my past experiences in different jobs, all kind of like doing the same thing. And I kind of I just remember like this one time I was feeling a lot of pressure. I was like waking up with anxiety. And at one point I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I don't think I want to do this anymore. So I quit, and then I didn't do anything for a month. And I just sort of sat back, and each time I think about it, I realize that this is sort of like what happens is I'll go do this thing and I'll keep going. And then I come to a point where I'm like, I can't do it anymore. So I quit and I completely back off. Sometimes it's a month or a couple months at a time. I'd say like at most it's been like 2 months where I just don't do anything. And what I mean by that is like, I don't work. Like I quit my job at that time, and I just kind of like shut down.
Rest.
Yeah, I rest, and then I get back to it. So that's why I say it's really interesting, because when I got out of working in a job, I feel like it just, to me, the root center also relates a lot to like the workforce. Because when I think of burnout, I really think of like the workforce a lot of the time. I mean, if you think about it, like, what are we working for? Like, we're working for our basic needs to be met, because that's the way in which the system sort of feels like it has to be. And so leaving that, like, an environment where you're working for somebody else, or being an employee of some sort, and then I took a break. I mean, I had to. A lot of the times also, like, my body will just hit this point where it just starts shutting down. And I've gotten a little bit better at taking notice of when that happens, so that I can, like, that's a cue for me to be like, okay, I've hit an edge and I need to like retract a bit and get myself back into like a state of like, all right, a little bit more balanced. And so in the last couple of years of just like working for myself and being at home, like I've mentioned, I had a lot of downtime. I had a lot of time to like recuperate. I mean, going through different kind of like healings and sheddings, and just also going through like that Saturn return phase, and a whole new cycle of life coming about, and a lot of big changes. And now being back, I feel like I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know how it's gonna happen. I like to think that I'm trying to experience my energy, my energetic constitution a little bit more intimately, so that I don't have to hit an edge. But the reality is, like, very honestly, like the last 48 hours, I did hit an edge. And I don't know, necessarily how long this will go on for. I mean, I love what I do and I don't want to not do it. But at the same time, I also recognize that I'm just I think we're all sensitive beings, but I can recognize within myself that with a lot of openness in my chart, that I feel like sometimes I'm like extra sensitive to things. And because I feel like my heart center so the heart and the throat are motor centers. Is it throat and motor center?
I think it's the heart, the emotional solar plexus, the root. that
and
right?
the sacral. There's 4. Yeah. And,
Yes.
and either way,
Yes.
you know, having
You're testing me.
no, not at all. Having a defined heart, I feel like sometimes I could probably convince myself to think that I have the energy to do something, because I really do have such a strong motivation for things sometimes. But I have to recognize that motivation and physical energy
Are different.
are different. Yeah. So
Yeah.
burnout, I mean, it's real. I haven't necessarily hit it yet, but I can recognize that it's probably surfacing in some way.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that you kind of have this inner awareness of when you're hitting that edge, and you are able to kind of pull back, and like perhaps in the past that's led to quitting a job, or taking an extended period of time to rest. And it makes me think of that 5th gate energy that's so prominent in your chart, that just knows like the right timing of things, and like I suppose knows when enough is enough. Or that wisdom of the open sacral to know, to recognize when enough is enough, because I've had a very different experience. And I think that that's because I received a lot of conditioning growing up about not giving up. You keep going, you keep persevering, you keep pushing, you keep doing, you keep achieving. Like that was really ingrained in my family, that you work hard in order to be successful, and you keep going and you don't quit. Like I just think back to like university. I was not happy. I didn't enjoy it. I needed a break. After school, I worked so hard in school to get good grades, and then I really needed a break. And in hindsight, if I could go back and do it again, I would have taken a gap year, like a year off, and gone to travel, or to do something else, to do something creative, or just work in a cafe or whatever, something a little less intense than going and studying for 4 years. But I just did that because that's what was expected of me. And even though I wasn't happy in the course, I didn't quit, because I was like afraid of what that would mean, how that would look. Failure. And then I also persisted. My last job I did have an in-between job before quitting and doing my own thing solely, which is what I do now. But for the majority of my career, I worked in government. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot. I worked with beautiful people, but I knew for a long time that it wasn't what I really wanted to be doing, but I persisted. And I wonder if that is like a shadow frequency of one of these root energies, is like just persisting and continuing, even though you don't really have the energy for it. Because I was just afraid to quit. So I stayed there for 8 years, even though my heart wasn't in it, which is my authority. My heart wasn't in it. And so then I finally hit this point where I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I got this other job in between. And then I learned about human design, and I learned that it is correct for me to just follow what my heart is telling me to do. And so I then made that decision. That was the first one of the big decisions that I've made with my authority, was to quit and to, finally do what I really wanted to do, which has come with its own challenges. But I reached this extreme point of burnout when I quit my job last year, because it all caught up with me. And it was almost like the last 15 years, or probably longer, because even through school, I was working so hard. I was doing so much. I was in all kinds of extracurricular activities. I was doing music and all kinds of things. And it's like it all caught up with me last year. And I just had 3 months where I couldn't do anything. I was so exhausted. And so I've kind of had a pretty intimate relationship with burnout, because it's happened to me a couple of times throughout my life in these extreme ways, where it was like I was being forced to rest. As much as I wanted to do other things, my heart was like so eager to get to work doing the things that I'm really passionate about. My body was like, we just can't do this right now. We need to rest.
Yeah, no, for sure. I really do think that this, I mean, there's conditioning in a lot, in all of it, right? But I feel like the root center and its conditioning is, a lot of people probably experience it. And I sometimes, when I talk about burnout, if I've ever, experienced it or whatever, I sometimes feel like guilty to think that I have, because I've only really been out of school and working, so to speak, right, for not that long. It hasn't been that long. It's been like 6 years. And to me, it's like, how do you hit burnout? You've only worked for this amount of time. And I think that this is one of those really important conversations where it's not just an individual thing. It's very much like of a collective thing. It doesn't matter if I hadn't like worked 20 plus years in a setting that's just been so demanding. I think that that's why maybe more of us experience it, in our generation, or just at a younger age, because it's just getting to this point where now it needs to be something that is discussed more often, so that it can be more maybe preventative, or we can look at the ways in which we're trying to condition everybody to mobilize in the same fashion, when it's not really realistic. And I feel like I'm just having a pep talk with myself right now of like, okay, really having an honest reflection of like, what is it like when you feel like you have to get things done, or feel like you have to do things but don't want to.
There was something that you said that I wanted to circle back on, and I can't. I'm just trying to remember. It was something to do with like this collective pressure and this collective burnout. And it makes me think of what we've seen in the last few years, the Great Resignation. Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
Like, so many people of our generation and younger just realizing like the pace that they're going at is so unsustainable, and that they don't even want that. Like, what's it all for? We're working so hard, but what's it all for? To build these lives that, do we even want them? That's been kind of my realization as well. Like, I've worked so hard for all these things that I thought I wanted, only to realize like that's actually not what I really want. That's actually not going to make me happy. And it makes me think again about this, going back to this idea of survival, and that it is a tribal energy. This is in the tribal circuit. It's in the ego circuit of within the tribal circuit. And so, yeah, it just again makes me think of this awakening that we're all having as a collective as we move into the new paradigm, recognizing that we just can't keep working the way we've been working. It's unsustainable. We are burning out collectively and individually, and we need to find new ways to have our needs met and to meet each other's needs.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as I was kind of sharing and just kind of listening to our discussion of how this really does feel like coming back to what are our basic needs, and which are the ways in which we feel like we have to do in order to get those needs met, and how much of us are just in a constant cycle or state of stress because we don't feel like our basic needs could be met if we went any slower.
If we were to slow down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fear. It's like rooted in this
Which
fear.
is why I think that like the times where I've like hit these edges and have like completely called it quits and sort of in some ways sometimes collapsed and other times just couldn't really do much. I feel like each time that I do that and that I have done that, it's been a deeper understanding to really be in that experiment of knowing that if I slow down, I'm still taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about this. He talks about like this relationship with nature and how, you know, humans and animals are moving to this place once again, returning to where we will be able to live in harmony once again. And, you know, this idea of sacrifice with animals to feed us, this idea of food and resources. And another thing that I thought of is that he mentions how it's like really important. This gene key, the 19th gene key, is like specifically relevant at this time. And I think this is what he's really talking about, like moving into the new paradigm. Yeah. Although it may be a difficult birth in the not too distant future, the 19th shadow will have disappeared entirely from our world. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that people who embody this 19th energy, I sort of feel like they're here to go through the shadows of this experience so that then they can give others the example that we don't necessarily need people in order to fulfill our needs or to fulfill us in a sense. And that once we do that, we realize that our relationships are really, they're, like he says, interconnected. And so that there is a more harmonious way of engaging with other people, but we need to realize like this sense of independence is actually really important for us. And it's not this idea of like, you know, people were saying like we've become a very individualistic society, but I think what some people aren't realizing is that we need that at this point. We need people to really hone in with themselves and recognize that they have all of the skills and capabilities to be that independent so that then they can be part of the tribe even more so. And I only, you know, I just say this for myself. I feel like myself and the people that I've come across who kind of have gone in between the different energies of this frequency or frequency of this energy, however you want to say it, that there's some of the people who really live in service to others. The most independent people, I feel, can really give to others in a much more reciprocal kind of way, like maintain those boundaries. And
when you're not just out to have your own needs met, when you feel like I have everything that I need within me, I have all my needs met, you're able to give to other people. It's just this idea of like filling up your own cup in order to have it overflow, to be able to help others. Like you can't pour from an empty cup. And so you also said it's about like this individual energy. It's not a bad thing. This is what we need right now. And this is actually the energy of the new paradigm. It's all about, we're moving from collective to individual energy. So we need empowered individuals who are meeting their own needs to be able to then service the needs of others and the collective. Yeah. I also loved that it's one last thing, because I feel like we've kind of said everything we we need to say. But one last thing is that I love that the partner, the programming partner, is the 33rd gene key, which I just had a quick look at. The shadow is forgetting, and then the gift is mindfulness. And it just makes me think of like this remembering of our true nature, and this remembering of our place in the whole, as part of the whole, and this idea of mindfulness, just being present with our reason for being here, you know, being present with life and the interconnectedness of it all.
Yeah. Well, very cool.
Anything else you want to share?
No, I think we really touched on some big concepts around the root center and the conditioning and ways in which to sort of work with getting out of the not self and just having more awareness of how to mobilize our energy, especially if it's an undefined center for us. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching.
All right, until next time, we'll see you guys soon.
Take care.